Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with another video. So it's July 1st, 2025. We're halfway through the momentous year of 2025, and the topic of my video today is going to be about the what I call the three perfidious watchdogs. That is the treacherous IAEA, the OPCW, and the OSCE. These are three organizations that are considered to be supranational. You could say they're supposed to be objective observers and not enforcers, but they provide information and act as maybe facilitators of international harmony, so to speak. But the situation with the IAEA and Rafael Grossi, who has been exposed essentially as a spy for Israel and the United States under the rubric of being this independent watchdog organization that was watching and monitoring Iran's nuclear program. He was actually spying for the United States and Israel, which is, many people have talked about the fact that it would have been impossible for Israel to assassinate all the people that it did when it attacked Iran earlier on without inside information. And it was almost certainly passed on to them by Rafael Grossi or his team from the International Atomic Energy Agency. But you have these other organizations, the OPCW, the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, and the OSCE, the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe. And these are all organizations that have basically operated hand in glove with the empire. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So the title again is Perfidious Watchdogs, the treacherous IAEA, the OPCW, and the OSCE. And my article starts off with a picture of Rafael Grossi, head of the IAEA, with a caption, "A nice smile, but can you really trust this guy?" So it's time to call out the perfidious imperialist powers. Let's state openly that these three organizations, the IAEA, the OPCW, and the OSCE, are tools of imperialist powers, exemplified especially by the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union countries, and their military arm, NATO. Let's call things by their true name. First of all, let's call things by their true name. In recent years, the term globalist has floated around. It seems to mean those who see things from a global point of view. But what we're really talking about are the imperialist powers of Europe and the United States, who have exercised control, hegemony, starting in 1492 when Columbus invaded the Western Hemisphere. Here, imperialism means empire, which is marked by ruthless expansionism, land and resource theft, lies and broken promises and broken treaties and agreements, slavery and exploitation, and brutal methods of subjugating populations that the empire comes into contact with. The original perennial purveyor of perfidy, Great Britain, or the United Kingdom. I don't know why they call it great, but whatever. What is perfidious Albion? Perfidious Albion is a term used by some people to describe the British Empire. It is a term that suggests that the British were deceitful and treacherous in their dealings as an empire. As such, it is a term used by those wanting to portray the British Empire in a negative light. This is taking this off of the internet. The term is quite old, but in the context of the British Empire, it was used about England previously, and it is commonly attributed to the French playwright, and forgive my pronunciation, Augustin Louis de Jiménez. And apparently even Mussolini's fascists used the term to criticize Britain's empire and dominance. If the fascists are criticizing England, you're really getting into some heavy-duty territory here. So let's take each one of these perfidious and nefarious organizations one by one. The IAEA, the Atomic Energy Agency, and Rafael Grossi. His tenure has been marked by violation of professional integrity regarding Iran. As of June 2025, Grossi, as the head and spokesperson for the organization, has been told by Iran that his activities inspecting its nuclear facilities severely compromised Iran's security, resulting in the assassination by Israel of several Iranian nuclear scientists. He criticized the 20-year-old outdated evidence insinuating that Iran was not acting within the rules of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, thus, quote-unquote, justifying both the Israeli and U.S. attacks. So that's his first error, so to speak. What's worse, he has been in contact with the Israelis to discuss what? Israel is not even a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, yet they get a free pass from him, and he's sharing information with them. It's outrageous. Worse yet, Grossi failed to condemn the attacks which are themselves a gross violation of the treaty. Attacking nuclear installations is an international crime. You're creating the conditions for a serious radiological problem, near this facility. Iran allowed inspections yet was punished without evidence. This invalidated the purpose of the treaty. Justifiably, Iran refuses him access any longer, yet Grossi whines and threatens Iran, demanding he continue his same behavior. This is a pattern where the Western countries tend to moralize and point their fingers at their victims and try to put them on the psychological defensive, you could say, in order to just disarm them psychologically, and then they go after them, physically. And this is a typical what Grossi is doing by criticizing Iran when he's the one who actually is the criminal. It's characteristic. Now, I go on here because he also violated his professional integrity regarding Russia and Ukraine. Following years of the Ukrainian government attacking people in eastern Ukraine, after the U.S.-sponsored coup in 2014, Russia heeded the request, I would say the pleas, of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics and started its special military operation. It quickly took control of the major Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, that's Russia. And some party has been shelling the plant ever since. You think really that Russia is attacking a nuclear power plant that it is operating and it has people there? So it's easy to tell where the shelling is coming from: Ukraine. This puts all Europe at risk if the shelling results in release of radioactivity. Yet Grossi has adamantly refused to call out the Ukrainian regime for its gross violation of international law. The inescapable conclusion: Grossi is acting as a spy and agent for the collective West. He's not a neutral observer. Okay, the next one is the OPCW, the enabler of chemical warfare. The OPCW, the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons, was charged with inspecting Syria's chemical weapons. At one point, it accused Syria of using chemical weapons against its own people. This charge was suspicious because Syria was defeating anti-government rebels. Shortly before the inspectors arrived, an attack occurred which was blamed on Syria in official documents. However, several inspectors who were actually on the ground disputed the final report. The accusations against Syria, like accusations against Iraq's weapons of mass destruction in 2003, were falsified and politicized. Expert on such weapons, Professor Ted Postel, agrees that the OPC report, which was used by the U.S. to attack Syria, were politicized and false. Next, we have the OSCE. Is it a neutral observer in Donbass or the spotter for Ukrainian attacks? The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe monitored the Minsk agreements. The OSCE findings were that the Special Monitoring Mission reported observing a significant increase in explosions, with 553 explosions in Donetsk alone. In February 2022, there was a significant escalation in shelling activity in eastern Ukraine, with the number of explosions reported by the OS increasing dramatically. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe reported over 1,400 explosions in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions, which were at the center of tensions between Russia and Ukraine. While the initial claim of a transition from 40 to 1,400 shells per day is not explicitly stated in the provided research results, the general trend of increased shelling activity is well documented. And yet the OSCE is saying, we don't know what's going on. Looks like they're attacking each other equally. The OSCE's mission in Donbass, which the organization itself claims to be arms control, promotion of human rights, early warning, conflict prevention, crisis management, has already failed. In fact, it has continually been failing for 8 years. This report was from 2022. Because how else could you call the fact that the Ukrainian shelling of the people of Donbass never stopped? Worse yet, former president of the post-Maidan Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, once openly stated that our kids will be going to school freely while their kids will be hiding in basements. So much for president of all Ukrainians. The OSCE never reacted to such statements. Needless to say, OSCE's post-conflict rehabilitation not only failed, since it failed to achieve any of its previous goals, but is highly unlikely to ever be conducted by the OSCE, given that the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics have effectively banned the organization and ordered it to leave their territory. Now, why would the leadership make such a move? Has an OSCE been helping the last 8 years? Well, it turns out that they just didn't do anything to prevent the conflict from raging for the last 8 years. But they might have even done certain things to facilitate it. This is a source from Southfront. Southfront is an independent news organization. I've followed them for a number of years, and they're basically banned on YouTube. So, that's, if they're banned on YouTube, it means they're probably telling the truth. In a rather disturbing revelation by war correspondent Alexander Sladkov, OSCE has used high-resolution cameras originally placed to conduct ceasefire monitoring to relay DNR and LNR positions to the Ukrainian military, which would then use the provided data to target or correct their artillery fire at the DNR and LNR forces. Sladkov further explains how the OSCE mission in Donbass provided the armed forces of Ukraine with their observation data, captured by cameras and other monitoring equipment they installed over the last 8 years. In essence, OSCE was spying and effectively waging war on the side of the post-Maidan Kiev regime. To make matters worse, they provided monitoring data also included the movement of regular Russian military personnel in the last 50-plus days. This is a quote from Southfront. Following the Minsk agreements, which were supposed to resolve the dispute between the Kiev coup regime and the people in the Donbass region of Ukraine, it was the job of the OSCE to monitor the agreement. The problem was that the Kiev regime and its German and French backers never intended to implement the agreement. Instead, Ukraine forces continued shelling civilian areas for 8 years, and the OSCE turned a blind eye to the violations. And in this article, I also cite an article, my own article that I had written from earlier called "No More Games, No More Illusions," in which I explained how I first started getting involved in tracking what the problem was in Ukraine and the problems with Russia and its relations with the United States. Um, I'll quote the beginning of the blurb at the beginning of my website, or this article. It's called "No More Games, No More Delusions." I started this blog to have a record of my travels in Asia, starting in Thailand, then visiting Myanmar, Laos, China, India, Singapore. In 2015, I stopped traveling so much, but did get to Russia, where I have had interest in due to ancestral ties. I have 4 grandparents who came from the Russian Empire, as well as the role that the Soviet Union played in world history and now Russia. In 2013, I started noticing events unfolding in Russia, and especially in its former borderland area, which in Russian is called the Ukraine, or borderland. And the article goes on. You can check it out. I personally knew a fighter for the Donetsk People's Republic, Russell Bentley, who said that he was instructed to hold fire even if fired upon, and every bullet or shell was strictly controlled with punishment for violations. He explicitly told me that when he saw a civilian with her legs blown off after a Kiev plane bombing run hit a civilian building, that he decided to fight those who were clearly fascists. He saw this, I think, online when he was in the United States at the time. He saw that. I've seen the same video, and it's basically what happened was the Ukraine military bombed, I think it was like the city hall or some civic building in Luhansk, the city of Lugansk, and one of the civilian victims was this woman who is dying. Her legs have been blown off. She's looking at the camera. It's very heart-wrenching, experience just to see her in that state. And Russell, who had a military background in the United States, thought, I've got to go and help these people. Conclusion. Is it any surprise that the collective West, which notoriously attacked Iraq based on lies about weapons of mass destruction, or Libya about distributing Viagra to its soldiers, not to mention the earlier lies about the Tonkin Gulf attacks that precipitated the Vietnam War, and any number of other examples, would employ supposedly neutral international organizations to tilt the scale? One final note here. Regarding Iran's nuclear program, President Trump has insisted that U.S. bombs and missiles obliterated Iran's nuclear program. 2 major problems. Targeting nuclear facilities violates the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I mean, attacking a nuclear facility could release massive amounts of radiation. Essentially, the nuclear material that was presumably underneath this mountain that Trump bombed, it amounted to maybe 800 pounds or something. And if you blasted that stuff and it got dispersed all over the place, it would be the equivalent of a dirty bomb. It's not an atomic bomb, but it would be the equivalent of a dirty bomb dispersing all of this stuff. Now, of course, they make arguments about the fact that these bombs were designed to implode the ground where these materials were located. But the reality is that if they had actually done that and the material had been compromised, radiation detection is at very, very high levels. They could have determined that there was nuclear material there, and there's not been a word about nuclear material being released from Fordo or the other 2 nuclear sites. President Trump claims that these bombs penetrated from the surface to the caves where the nuclear material is supposedly located. As I said earlier, if so, the radiation would be easily detectable. There's been no mention of it. Therefore, it's highly likely, in my opinion, that there was either no radioactivity, no radioactive material there. That is, they had actually removed it, And given the fact that it amounted to only 800 pounds, Trump says there was so much of it and it would have been impossible to get it out of there. I mean, 800 pounds, fits in a flatbed truck, because the stuff is so dense that it doesn't take up a lot of volume. So everything about Trump's narrative is really, it's just, you have to be, just unthinking and frankly stupid to believe it. I mean, I can't understand how he gets up and he says stuff day after day and people actually believe what he has to say. So I say, therefore, it is highly likely that there either was no radioactive material or the bombs never penetrated, or both. Just another lie exposed. So that's what I've got to say about the problem with these three watchdog agencies. They've been discussed in other contexts, but I wanted to bring together these three organizations because they're part of this bigger picture of the West's collective obsession with control of the planet. And they'll do anything to start a war, including falsify information using a presumably neutral observer organization like the IAEA or the OSCE or the OPCW. So thank you very much for listening. Again, if you'd like to support my work, there's links below where you can buy me a coffee or make a donation on PayPal or subscribe. Of course, subscribe to Substack. That's really great. Or you can go to one of my websites and buy a T-shirt. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you next time.